The Sony Mega Storage CD players are perfect for any CD collector. Whether you have 50, 100, 200, or even 400 CDs, these can store, catalog, and play your entire music collection. You can even record the name of albums and artists to make browsing your CD collection easy and fun. This can be added using onboard controls, the original remote, or an old external PS2 keyboard. But the larger the collection, the more cumbersome it can get. Even if you're a fast typist, entering hundreds of CDs can take hours. And if you have 2 or 3 players, you're gonna need a second remote. Enter the Nirvis Slink-E. This third-party add-on allows you to connect your Mega Storage players to your computer, giving you full control to your CD library and saving you hours of data entry. How does it do this? Through an old application called CDJ. I've been using a Slink-e and CDJ to play my CDs for about a year using this old laptop that still runs Windows 7. But I just got a mini PC that runs Windows 11, and I'm ready to upgrade my setup onto a computer from this decade. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to document how to set this all up for any potential Slink-e users. Let's begin with a list of components and parts that you'll need. Obviously, you'll need a Sony Mega Storage CD player. These come in a variety of shapes and sizes, so here's a list of compatible models. Basically, it's all the ones that have the A1 second generation control ports. Speaking of which, you'll need an A1 second generation control cable for each player that you want to connect. Fortunately, you can just use a regular 3.5mm aux cable. You probably have a bunch of these lying around somewhere. If not, they're very cheap and easy to find. In fact, this might be the most available cable ever created. Time for the trickier items to find. Probably the most important and hardest item to get is the Nirvis Slink-E itself. These devices are old, rare, and therefore expensive. Unfortunately, I have no tips on how to find one of these. Your best bet is to reach out to people on AV forums or Facebook groups and beg some stodgy old audio hoarder to sell you one that they're no longer using. To connect the Slink-E to your computer, you'll need an RS-232 to USB cable. You'll probably have to buy this one online because the adapter is very specific and not something you'd find at a major electronics store. But this cable connects your Slink-E to your computer, so you'll probably want to plan out where you want to place all your components and then order one with enough slack. Finally, you'll need a computer that can run Windows. It doesn't need to be new, it doesn't need to be powerful, but it does need to be tethered to the Slink-E at all times. So this should probably be a compact dedicated device that you won't be using for anything else, like an old laptop or a mini PC. But it definitely needs to run Windows, or at least a virtual machine that can run Windows. Now that we have all our pieces, let's talk about the setup. Most of this should be pretty straightforward since a lot of the plugs and ports are a one-to-one match. First, take the RS-232 to USB cable and connect the serial port side to the Slink-E. Then plug the USB end to your computer. Next, plug the aux cable into one of the Slink-E control ports. If you have multiple CD players you want to connect, you have to repeat this process for each player. And if you have more than 4 players, you can actually daisy chain the CD players together, connecting up to 12 devices with just one Slink-E. Lastly, connect the DC adapter to power on the Slink-E. Hopefully your Slink-E came with a DC power supply. Mine did not, but these are really cheap and easy to find as long as you know what to look for. It needs to be a DC 5525 barrel connector rated at 9 volts and powering at least 600 milliamps. You can also power it via USB as long as you have a 9 volt buck converter like this one. Now that everything is connected properly, the indicator light should turn on green. If it doesn't, try disconnecting and reconnecting it again. If it flashes orange, it may be a sign that the power supply you have is not correct. So make sure it is 9 volts and at least 600 milliamps. That's it for the physical setup. The rest will be done on the computer, so let's switch to that screen. The software used to operate the CD players was created by Nirvis, the same company that made the Slink-E, and somehow their website is still online as of March 2026. This includes the link to download the software as well as some documentation. I'd recommend saving all of this because there's no telling when this website will go down. I mean, it's kind of a miracle that it's still up after being out of business for over 20 years. Like, who's still paying the bills? You can also use the Wayback Machine to check out old versions of the website. There are some useful gems in here that you can no longer find on the current site. I discovered that CDJ still installs perfectly fine on Windows 11. Again, if you don't have a Windows computer, you can still do it through a virtual machine as long as you can grant it access to your USB ports. Once you've downloaded the exe file, open it. The installation process is fairly straightforward, but if you've never installed a program from the previous century, just stick with the default configuration and keep clicking OK and Next. Once it's done, you'll find it in your Start menu. If you want to add a desktop shortcut or pin it to your taskbar, you'll have to do that manually since this is an application from the time before that was done automatically for you. I also want to note that this isn't just one application. There are a series of apps that come with CDJ, but more on that later. One last thing to check, let's open up CDJ to make sure everything is installed correctly. You may get a warning message that you are missing a DLL file. If CDJ fails to open or keeps crashing, you need to download that missing DLL file online. This happened on my old Windows 7 laptop. But on this new Windows 11 mini PC, it opens without any problems. Now that you have CDJ open, you'll notice that there are 5 albums waiting for you in the library. These are only put here as a template. I'm going to delete them because I don't own them, and I recommend you do the same so you can start with a clean slate. Now that we have our blank slate, it's time to get it connected to our Slink-E. Let's open up the settings menu. Here you'll find several different tabs to configure. And let's go to the Slink-E tab. On this configuration screen, you'll find checkboxes for all the individual COM ports. I recommend flagging Use Slink-E Serve. Slink-E Serve is one of the additional apps that got installed along with CDJ, and this allows us to test and configure the Slink-E. Let's go ahead and open it up. You're going to see a similar configuration screen with several checkboxes for COM ports. You see, before the days of USB ports, a lot of peripheral devices were connected using serial ports. These serial ports were not universal like USB and came in different sizes. They also weren't plug and play, which is why we had to define which COM port the Slink-E is connected to. For our purposes, you can go ahead and leave them all checked off since you probably aren't using any other COM ports anyways. That is, unless you're using a computer that's even older than the Slink-E. Go ahead and close Slink-E Serve, and when you reopen it, it should now recognize your connected Slink-E and which port it's connected to. In my case, it's COM port 3, but it'll most likely be a different port number for you. If you ever unplug your Slink-E and replug it into a different USB port, it'll most likely be recognized as a different COM port number. This is fine, and it's why I recommended checking off all the COM port numbers just to be on the safe side. Now that our Slink-E is recognized by Slink-E Serve, we can minimize it into the tray. And now let's close CDJ and restart the application. Thanks to all this configuration, CDJ will now look to Slink-E Serve, and Slink-E Serve will look to COM port 3, and voila! CDJ is finally connected to our Sony CD players. At this point, we've completed the basic configuration and we're ready to control our CD players and start listening to our music. When you play a CD for the first time, you'll see this pop-up asking you to connect to CDDB. This is an old online database that would automatically populate album titles, artists, and even track names for you. This feature completely automates the cataloging process and, believe it or not, it still works. But since it requires further advanced configuration, I'll go over it in a second video. For now, you can close this window and manually add your own metadata. At this point, we've completed the basic configuration and we're ready to control our CD players and start listening to our music. This concludes the installation of the Nirvis Slink-E and CDJ. Do you have a Slink-E? Let everyone know how you were able to find it in the comments below. If you found this tutorial helpful, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching and happy listening.